Well, good evening, grace and peace unto everyone. I pray that you are having and enjoying a great day. This is our last session before we start our summer break. So we're doing a family matter segment on tonight. I thought it not robbery that we continue to give you information that you will need, and this is important information on tonight. We have my good friend and brother from Watkins, Garrett, and Woods, who we work together each and every day. He's going to be giving us some information on pre-need insurance, and I think it is very good if we give a listening ear so that we can spread word out into the community that we need some insurance when we leave here. You don't want your business on PayPal and all that good stuff and GoFundMe, but you want to have your house in order, as we talked about on Sunday. So as he comes, we're going to breathe a word of prayer, and then he's going to come. Father, we love you. We thank you on this day now for all things. We thank you now for just blessing us to be together once more and again. Now we thank you for the information that is going to be given unto us on tonight. Bless us, be with us, keep us now. In your Father, in your name of Jesus we pray. Amen. I introduce Mr. Chester Henderson.
All right, well, thank you, Pastor Edwards. First, let me express appreciation for Pastor Edwards inviting me here. We are colleagues, like he said, but he didn't need to do this. So I appreciate the invitation to come. And I know the reason for the invitation was to help you all get as much information as you need so that when this time comes, and even before, that we're as prepared as we can be. So I normally don't read the Bible, quote scripture, when it comes to doing funeral planning. But I think given where we are, it's appropriate. Everyone knows this scripture, so I'm going to read one for you because it reinforces why we're talking about advanced funeral planning. Psalms 90, in verse 10, it reads this way. Let me make sure I get there. It says, "The days of our years are 80 years and 10. A score is 20. 3 of those is 60 plus 10 is 70 years. And if by reason of strength they be 80 years. Yet is their strength, labor, and sorrow." So full of pain and sorrow, most of us will experience that. "For it is soon cut off, and we fly away." Now, we're not talking about the flying away part. We're going to stay here tonight. Because I don't want you to be like some people who come to see me at 80 plus years of age and say, "I think it's time that we finally take care of some of this stuff." No, it was time 20 years ago. Because the older you are, the more difficult it gets to be planning this stuff because it all comes with a cost. I think we all realize that now. Even to come in as babies, it comes with a cost. But nobody complains about that one. But exiting, that comes with a cost too. And we don't want to just simply leave these things to our family members, our children, or whoever it may be. Even in movies, they recognize this. If you saw the Black Panther movie, the father says to the son that if I as a father have not prepared my children for my death, then I have failed as a father. So we don't want to leave these things to our children because they may or may not be in a position to handle these costs when they come up. Because death doesn't operate on our schedule, and we're never quite prepared when it happens. So, as we get into this tonight, and of course my stuff don't want to cooperate with me, we're here to talk about pre-need insurance and how that can help us when it comes to planning for funerals. So let me read this because this is my synopsis of why we're doing this presentation. The purpose of this presentation is to make everyone aware of the option of pre-need insurance and the many benefits of it. Now, traditionally, many of us, meaning funeral homes, have relied on trust, meaning taking money in, putting it in a bank, and life insurance once an individual passes to pay for funerals. But we want to consider how pre-need insurance can help alleviate problems that are experienced on both of those fronts when it comes time to pay for a funeral. So question, when it comes to planning for a funeral, if I were to ask, and you can even do this at home, you can raise your hand, if I were to say, is life insurance the way to pay for funerals? Would you say yes or no? Okay. But is it the best way? Most of us can't come out of pocket with, on average, over $8,000 to pay for a funeral, right? Most of us aren't in that situation. And if we have life insurance, which is how most of us have been trained to pay for a funeral, we would think that we're in a pretty good spot. But there's a problem with both of those scenarios. One, cash, I think everybody understands and knows that that's short, and most of us can't just stroke a check for that much. Most people aren't in that position. If you have life insurance, you would think you're doing well, and that's good. But funerals are not the purpose of life insurance. Life insurance is for the living. That's why they call it life insurance. It's meant to pass on money to individuals in your family to replace the income that's been lost once you pass. That's what life insurance is for. But a change, an addendum was made to allow those insurances to be assigned to the funeral home to pay for a portion, to take a portion out to pay for a funeral and give the rest to the beneficiary. But there's a problem. What if an individual stops making their premiums? They lose it. What if the beneficiary decides that he or she is going to take that money and renovate their house? Can you stop them? They are meant to benefit, and they don't have to, and they're not obligated to pay for a funeral. So they can use that money however they want. And the last case that most people don't know about is, what if the insured on a policy gets old enough and sick enough to where they need to file for Medicaid to offset some of those medical costs that come with just getting older? If you have a life insurance policy that has more than $2,000 cash value, between that and money you have in the bank, the government will say, you don't qualify for Medicaid. You have access to too much money. And what happens to that life insurance in that case? That individual will have to surrender, give up that policy, whether it was a $10,000, a $100,000 policy, it doesn't matter. You got to give it up. The company will then pay you out what they think is worth. And between the money that you have in the bank and that money that they would give you, if you still have more than $2,000, you have to spend money down. We call it a Medicaid spend down in order to get qualified for Medicaid. And you can't just spend it on what you want. They're going to tell you what you have to spend it on or what you're allowed to spend it on. That's a situation I have to deal with from time to time with individuals, and it's not fair, but that's the way it goes. So life insurance, although it's good, it is not totally protected when it comes to planning for funerals. So what kind of advanced planning or pre-need program do we have at Watkins, Garrett, and Woods? We use pre-need insurance, which is a type of insurance that covers the cost of a funeral. Now, there's no beneficiary. The funeral home is going to get the money. You don't have to worry about if someone is going to do what you want them to do. Okay, one benefit. Two, the government can't tell you that you have to get rid of it if you have too much money, because it's protected by the government. So as long as that is irrevocable, meaning you don't have access to go back and get that money, remember, because you can't have too much money, it is protected, and no matter where the funeral costs go in the future, your costs are locked in. Another benefit of doing pre-need insurance and pre-need and contracting with the funeral home. Now, while I'm on insurance, let me stay there for a minute, because I want to handle this before we get into specifics about pre-need insurance. I always have to talk to individuals about the difference between life insurance and pre-need insurance. I'm going to assume, I know that's dangerous, that most people understand what life insurance is, okay? And we're going to clarify some things. In the state of South Carolina, they draw a line. and they say, all you funeral directors, which I'm one, you on this side and you can only do pre-need insurance. Now, just to summarize it, pre-need insurance, you go to a funeral home, we work out and plan a funeral for you, whatever you want, and the insurance covers that. Okay, so it locks the price in for that funeral. And if you pass, and we'll get into this more later, if you pass, it can pay off that funeral even if the funeral hasn't been completely paid for, because that's the objective, to get the funeral paid for, not for you to pay insurance for the rest of your life. Okay? On one side, funeral directors do pre-need insurance. On the other side, everyone else that's licensed to do life insurance is on this side. Now, they can't do pre-need insurance because they're not funeral directors. They don't qualify. But even though I qualify, I'm not allowed to do life insurance. They do life insurance. And they do all kinds of life insurance, term, whole life, even something called final expense insurance. Now, this is the one thing that's very confusing to people because they're somewhat misrepresented. Even though it's called final expense insurance, it falls under this umbrella of life insurance. So it has all the characteristics of life insurance. You take out a policy for X amount. When you pass, the beneficiary, who is not the funeral home, an individual or individuals, would receive that money, and they may or may not decide to pay for a funeral with it. But from a consumer perspective, you think it's for your funeral because all you hear in your head is final expense. And most people think that that's for your funeral. So if you hear anyone talk about insurance, just make sure that it does what you expect for it to do. Life insurance passes money on to individuals. Pre-need insurance takes care of the funeral that you plan for yourself, whether it's a cremation or a funeral. Okay? And you can only get pre-need insurance at the funeral home. So if it's not a funeral director and it's not attached to a funeral home, it's not burial insurance like you hear them say on TV. Okay? Now, I don't mean to be talking down about life insurance because I have some. Okay? As long as it does what you expect for it to do, it's fine to have. Nothing wrong with it. So what are the benefits and the differences between those things? Let's get a little bit more into it. When what we used to do is you plan to pay for your funeral, we put a portion or whatever you're paying towards that in the bank. If you passed before it was completely paid for, whatever the balance was became due at that time. So I'm going to use $8,000 as a figure. The average funeral is now a little bit over $8,000. And if you have paid $2,000 into it, then you have a $6,000 balance for your family to pay off. Also, when it comes to life insurance, I'm going to deal with both of those together. If you have this in place for less than 2 years, it becomes what they call contestable. So they may or may not pay out the full amount. That's life insurance. And it takes the funeral home a while to process those funds. So paying for a funeral doesn't always happen quickly when it comes to trust. You may have a balance, and that can leave your family in a vulnerable position when it comes to the finances of the funeral. So what happens with pre-need insurance? So now we're at the point where Mr. Jones took out his pre-need insurance policy, he's been paying on it, and he dies. What happens to his pre-need policy that covers his funeral that he's planned? Well, when he took it out, there's defined growth on his policy. So it's $8,000, but it's going to grow to offset the rising costs of the funeral, which is why the funeral home can lock in a price and not expect the family to pay extra down the road. If Mr. Jones dies 2 months, 6 months, a year into his pre-need insurance policy that covers his funeral, it can still pay off the funeral in full, even if you've only been paying it 2 months. because it's designed to cover the funeral. That's what it's for. Okay? It locks in the price, obviously, we said that. Now, when he passes, because this is a two-way street, the funeral home is doing something for you, they're locking in the price, but the funeral home needs to get paid as well. I think we all understand that. Well, the funeral home can instantly get paid. They file a claim on that policy, get paid, and nobody else has to be involved with that, so we don't have to worry about if the family's going to do what you contracted for. So that's how you can make sure that your funeral is planned and your funeral is carried out exactly the way you want it to be. So we really have to be careful when we start looking at what vehicle we want to use to put our money into and how we want to pay for that. Watkins, Gary & Woods partners with a company called Homesteaders Life Company. They don't do life insurance. The only kind of insurance they do is pre-need burial insurance. Okay, we normally don't call it all of that, but I want to make sure that we understand exactly what it does. It's for pre-planning, and it covers burial costs. Okay? I'm hopping around here, excuse me. So what's the difference between life insurance? Because I know most of us think life insurance, because we've been trained that way, right? That the insurance industry, and I hate to kind of talk in terms of racial, but what the insurance industry has done over the last few generations has promoted others using life insurance to enrich their families and promoted it to us as something to be taken out to pay for funerals. So we want to use life insurance in a way that passes on generational wealth, which is fine. And we want to use pre-need insurance to take care of our burials, because even if you have access to $8,000 or whatever it's going to cost to bury you, all you need is more than one person to have a conflict. If Mr. Jones did his pre-need and he paid $8,000 cash for it and the money is sitting there and he's got 2 kids, we're talking about a trust. Those 2 kids come in to plan his funeral. They have to be in agreement on what to do. And if no money is paid, then we really have a heightened sensitive situation, because not only do they have to be in agreement as far as what to do, what casket to pick out, who's going to preach the funeral, who's going to sing. They got to be in agreement as far as how's it going to get paid. These are the situations where families come in and they make all the preparations, they plan everything, they pick everything out, and they get to that point, and the funeral home says, okay, so how are we paying for this, with insurance or what? And if there's no policy in place, that's when you see everybody start to look like bobbleheads, because they're trying to figure out what you're going to do before they say what they're going to do. So we want to keep you out of that kind of situation. So what's the rundown on what life insurance does? All right? Life insurance compared to pre-need insurance. All right? And I'm going to stay on this for a minute, and I'm going to keep hitting it because I know that it's in our brains as far as life insurance, funerals. That's just how we got it in our heads, because that's how we were taught. That's what our parents and grandparents did. Okay. How is life insurance protected? Now, this is all in the vein of funerals when it comes to using it for a funeral. Are life insurance proceeds protected from probate court? What do we think? Y'all can nod. No, they're not protected. Is the principal, or what they call the principal, the amount of money, the face of a life insurance, guaranteed? You take out a $10,000 policy, I just want to have something to bury me. And usually we start thinking about it in our 50s and 60s, I just want to have something to bury me. A whole lot of consequences come from doing it, from waiting that long, because if you have any type of diagnosis, if we have a weight issue, if we're a smoker, if we're a man, a lot of different factors come into play that keep bumping up the cost of it. But I got a $10,000 policy that I want to have in place to bury me. Is it a guarantee that the family's going to get that $10,000? What do we think? Ma'am? We hope. Good answer. Because it depends. If it's less than 2 years, maybe not. Maybe they get paid out the premiums that was paid in. Maybe they pay it out. Okay? If they borrowed against that policy and didn't tell anybody, like my stepdad did, you ain't gonna get as much as you thought you were gonna get. So that's a maybe, like you said. You hope. Is it going to grow and keep up with inflation? You took out an $8,000 policy. The funeral today costs $8,000. Funerals increase on average 3 to 4% annually. So in 5, 10, 20 years, is that life insurance policy going to keep up with it? What do we think? Well, this is a definite no. You took out an $8,000 policy, all it's ever going to be worth is $8,000. And no matter how much you pay into it and pay on it, all it's ever going to be worth is $8,000. So it's not going to keep up with inflation. So even though you took out this $8,000 policy, because that's what a funeral costs today, in 15, 20 years when you die, guess what? There's going to be a shortfall. And we have families experiencing that every day. 20 years ago, they took out a $5,000 policy because that was enough. But when they die today, it's not enough, and somebody still got to come up with some more money. That's why I say you got to make sure it does what you expect for it to do. Are the funds in a life insurance policy protected from creditors? You die, you leave some expenses. Is that life insurance protected? No. It's not protected. Another reason, like I said, I know I'm killing life insurance, but we just want to make sure we know what it does versus what it doesn't do. Last one, and this is a biggie, because we live in longer. And the longer we live, the more expensive we become as far as health costs go. And sometimes we need to get approved from Medicaid to offset some of those medical expenses that we start to experience. So is the life insurance protected from Medicaid? Now we got to know that Medicaid is a federal program. Medicare we all qualify for based on age. Medicaid, that's an income thing. And if you have access to too much assets or money, we already talked about the government can restrict whether you qualify for it or not. So the money in the life insurance policy, does that help or hurt when it comes to qualifying for Medicaid? It hurts. Like I say, life insurance in itself is not a bad thing. But if we have too much money that we can borrow against in conjunction with what we have in a bank or 401k, the government looks at all that, then you don't qualify. So is there any wonder now, I'm going to get off topic just for a second, that people who live in government housing or Section 8 housing don't do something to improve their situation? Because when you do, you get penalized. And that's fine if you want to jump out there on your own and say, I'll just take care of me, and I don't need no government help. Fine. But if you want to continue to receive housing and EBT and health benefits, they make it impossible for you to improve yourself. And that's why most people just stay under the thumb of the Medicaid system if they're on it. I lived in the projects up until I was 10 years old in Tampa, Florida, and I can go back to Tampa right now and visit people who lived in the same apartments 40 years ago. Because the system makes it hard for you to improve yourself without penalty. All right, so let me stop beating up on life insurance. Now let's look at pre-need insurance. Okay, pre-need insurance. We're going to ask the same questions. Are pre-need insurance funds, what's in the policy, protected from probate court? What do we think? So this is money in an insurance policy that's covering your funeral. Do we think that's protected from probate? It's totally protected. Don't have to get involved with Medicaid, and they can't do nothing about your pre-need insurance policy. Okay. The money that's in this policy, we said $8,000. You took out the policy on your funeral to cover an $8,000 funeral. Is the principal that $8,000 guaranteed to be there when you need it? Do we think so? Yes. Totally protected. You don't ever have to worry about losing it. It can't go nowhere, and nobody can't take it from you. Is there a defined growth, meaning the $8,000 policy, is it going to grow in order to keep up with inflation that would offset the future costs of the funeral that we know is going to be higher than $8,000? What do we think? Yeah. That's why the funeral home can lock in your price and don't have to worry about asking you for any extra down the road. Okay? Are the funds protected from creditors, those who you may owe money to? Can they get to that policy and try to get some money out of it? What do we think? No. They can't get to it. Totally protected. Last one, the Medicaid question. Do the funds in the pre-need funeral policy prevent you from being qualified for Medicaid? What do we think? They shouldn't. They don't. Remember, life insurance, they look at how much you can borrow against it. The pre-need insurance you can't borrow against. It is earmarked for your funeral. So you don't have to worry about whether you can get to it or not, or do anything that you shouldn't be doing with it. So it's totally protected. All right. So let me run through a few questions. I got sent some questions, and so this is going to get us a little deeper into some things, and hopefully you got some questions for me after we finish these, because this will help us understand, I think, pre-need insurance better. First question was, as far as cremation, do you partner with another funeral home to do cremations? So the short answer as of today is yes. Now, that's not an uncommon practice. As a matter of fact, most funeral homes partner with someone else to do it, because most funeral homes don't have their own crematory. But that's going to be changing here in the near future as far as Watkins goes. Okay, question number 2, can pre-need be moved to another funeral home? So let me answer this in 2 parts. The answer is yes, but if you're moving it before you pass, you say, I planned with funeral home A, and I want to move it to funeral home B. As long as funeral home B can do pre-needs, because everyone can't, but as long as funeral home B can do pre-needs, you can transfer it over there. But basically, you have that $8,000 to transfer over there in that policy and whatever comes with it down the road, the growth. You can move it. Now, if an individual, Mr. Jones, took out his $8,000 pre-need and he passes, and now the family says, you know what, we want to use funeral home B, you can move it over there. Funeral home B now calls Homesteaders Life Company, who we partner with for the pre-need insurance, and they file a claim. Now, they're going to have to provide some extra information to be able to get those funds, but it can be done. At Watkins, it's pretty easy. If you do it at Watkins and Mr. Jones passes today, tomorrow we call the insurance company, Homesteaders, they give us the information, and we have a check, we fill it out, we deposit it, the funeral home has its money. And you actually paid it for your funeral, which is the objective. You doing the pre-need, you want what you were doing to pay for the funeral. So that accomplishes that. Question number 3. Are pre-needs revocable or irrevocable. So there's a B part. The answer is yes, they can be both revocable and irrevocable. So meaning you enter into a contract for pre-need insurance, if you make it revocable, that means at any point down the line, you can say, cancel this, give me all my money back that I put into it. You could do that. If you make it irrevocable, you have a 30-day, what's called a free look period, to consider it. After 30 days, it's irrevocable. And that's what protects it against Medicaid. Because now the government is saying, you can't go back and get those funds, so we don't consider it your money anymore. And that's what can help you qualify for Medicaid if you're trying to get qualified for Medicaid. The B part of this question was, can an irrevocable contract be changed by a family member who is not the purchaser? No. If you do a pre-need insurance policy for yourself, no one can come along and change it. Only the owner can make changes before he or she passes. Now, once that individual passes and they come into the funeral home, they're contracted with the funeral home, so the funeral home is going to carry out their wishes. Okay? Question number 4. If the merchandise, meaning the casket, on the contract is no longer available, will there be an extra cost to choose another casket? Well, the answer is no, because there's a rule that we have to go by that tells us if the casket that you purchase on your pre-need insurance contract is no longer available, the funeral home has to allow the family to choose something of equal or greater value. So, caskets come in different levels as far as gauges. You picked one on one level. Now that particular casket is not available. They have to allow you to choose something on that same level. If nothing is available, which would be rare, but if nothing is available, they got to step it up to the next level. They can't just say, we got one sitting over here, we let you use. So that's a rule set in place by the government. Okay? Number 5, is there a payment plan, and what bank is used for deposits? So eliminate the thought of a bank. We can, and in rare situations, do a trust, meaning that we put money in the bank. But usually that's for individuals 80 plus years of age. So that's rare. We still do it, but it's rare. The way we do it now, there is a payment plan, and we partner with that company called Homesteaders Life Company. And based on your age and the amount of the funeral, I can tell you what the cost is going to be as far as premiums. And you have 5 different options. So when it comes to setting that up, an individual can pay it in full, because you can always do that. That's the whole objective, to get the funeral paid for. So you can just pay it in full. Or you can set payments up on 3 years, 5 years, 7, or 10 years. That's the most you can do it. So anywhere along the way, the whole objective of this program is to make sure that it's covered so that either you pay it off yourself, or if you pass before it's paid off, the insurance will pay it off for you. That's the whole objective of this thing. Last question was, what happens if the person is deceased before the pre-need is paid? And I jumped ahead and just answered it. If you die before the pre-need insurance policy is paid off, meaning 3, 5, 7, or 10 years, yeah, it can pay it off for you. So now those are the questions that were sent to me. We've got about 10 minutes or so. So I want to leave some time for you all to ask some questions. Do we have any questions, either a clarification that you may need or a question that you have? Man, did I all right, Mr. Willie. All right.
Just for clarification, you said that life insurance, you asked the question, is it protected by creditors?
From creditors.
From creditors? You said it's not?
No, because you could have to submit your policy information for probate, and if anybody out there is going to file a claim against your estate, when the policy is paid out, it could have to go to a creditor.
But if you have a beneficiary, the creditor can't come get money from your beneficiary.
Well, people don't always have beneficiaries listed on policies, or they can't be found, or there's a few things. But yeah, I know it doesn't make sense, but
No, it don't make.
yeah,
Okay.
they're not totally protected from creditors.
And one other thing, you were saying that the Medicaid is through the federal government? I thought that was state.
Medicaid?
Yeah.
No, that's a federal
That's
program.
federal? I know Medicare was federal, but I thought Medicaid was state.
No, listen, let me try to hem me up.
Oh, no, I'm not. I was just getting clarification. I'm not trying
I
to
do
hit
think it's federal. I do think it's a federal program. But either way,
Okay.
you have to qualify, and I know the qualifications of
All right,
what we
good
talked
enough.
about.
Okay.
All right.
Ask her.
Yes, ma'am. Up front here.
Where are we?
Pass up front, right here.
Hold on, Missy.
Now, you can go ahead. That's going to be getting to. I'll repeat the question. Go ahead. Okay, the question was, is there a cutoff date as far as age? I cannot do a pre-need insurance policy on anyone over 90. Okay? But like I said, I don't want you waiting that long, saying it's about time we did this, and you barely getting in there. It was already time years ago. And I've been told that a few times. But up to 90 years of age, but this is the way it goes. Up to 80, a person has all the options, 3, 5, 7, or 10 years. Once you're over 80, all you have is a 3 and a 5-year option. And once you're over 85, you only have a 3-year option. And the reason is because the insurance company is looking at the numbers. Life expectancy is what? For men, about 76, 75, 76. For women, a couple years more, right? We read Psalms 90 and 10 that says what? 70 years, 80 if you're exceptionally strong. And the insurance company is saying, you ain't even still supposed to be here. So they say you're high risk. So that's why you have less options as you get older when it comes to insurance. All right? So right. So the question was, the older you are the premium's going to be more? And the answer is yes, because like we said, high risk. A 60-year-old person paying for a pre-need insurance is going to be paying a little bit less than an 80-year-old. Even though they can insure the same cost, that 80-year-old's cost is going to be a little bit more. So I tell you what, well, let me make sure do we have any more questions? Yes, ma'am. Is that Ms. Brown? Yes. All righty.
I know that a pre-need package or regular funeral package, the cost depends on the items that we put in those packages. But can you give us a sort of a ballpark figure of a basic cremation package and a basic regular viewing of the body? Maybe $1,800.
No, I can.
Cremation package.
No, I do better than that. I give you specific numbers.
Okay.
Because we can't deal with averages or estimates. So as far as cremation costs go, there are 3 types of cremations. One is a cremation service. So we think of that as a regular funeral. The body's been embalmed. We have a regular funeral, but afterwards, the cremation takes place, and that's $3,495. But to that, we have to add, if you want family cards, programs, obituary in the newspaper, death certificates, we have to add to that $34.95. The next one down is a memorial service. So that's a funeral, but up front, instead of the casket being here, you'd have a setup for a pitcher, urn, or flowers. Besides that, the order of service takes place, and the cremation could have already taken place, because memorial means in memory of. So it's a service in memory of that person. They're just not here. The last one is a direct, what we call a direct cremation, meaning we'll take your body, have you directly cremated, and return those remains to the family. and that's $1,595. So I can give you the numbers for that. When it comes to a burial, the average cost is just a little bit north of $8,000. So we're talking about funeral costs, nothing cemetery related. So a lot of people end up adding their vaults in with their funeral plans because we sell them for less than the cemeteries do. So that usually will knock it up over $9,000. But the average cost of a funeral is about $8,000. Okay? Does that get you? Okay. All right. Any other questions? 'Cause I want to give you a rundown of what the average cost of a pre-need insurance policy would be. Okay? Now, of course, I can't do every situation. I'm just doing the average. So what I have here is numbers for a 60-year-old person, because people come to see me tend to be on average 60 to 65, average. So for an $8,000 funeral, like I said, you got 5 options. You could just pay it in full, $8,000 and be done. All right. If that 60-year-old person wants to pay for an $8,000 funeral, their monthly payment for 3 years would be $319 and change. I'm going to give you the whole numbers. If they want to set it up to pay for over 5 years, and no matter how you set this up, 3, 5, 7, or 10, it can be paid off early, okay? So you can do that, because like we say, the objective is to get the funeral paid for. Okay, 5 years, the number is $213 monthly. I'm going to give you a second in case you're writing. I see someone writing. If you want to set it up for 7 years, the monthly payment would be $179. And if you want to set it up for 10 years, the monthly is $138 a month. So when I do this, I have to ask 2 health questions because it is insurance. All right? And since we got a couple minutes, I'm going to just go ahead and give it all to you. The first question I have to ask is, are you bedridden or been advised to enter a hospital, nursing home, long-term care facility, a hospice program, or diagnosed with AIDS or AIDS-related complex? If you say no, we go to the second question, which is a little bit longer. They want to know, in the last 5 years, have you been diagnosed with cancer, stroke, heart attack, diabetes, liver, lung, kidney, or heart disease, circulatory, nervous disorder, anemia, or dementia? Now, if you can say no to both questions, great. If you start doing this today and you die before the second payment is made, they will pay off your whole funeral. Okay? Now, if you have to say yes to one of those questions, you can still do this. You cannot be denied for it. It's not like life insurance. You cannot be denied for this, to do this. But then they're going to put some parameters in place. They're going to say you got to live beyond a year or 2 years before it'll be fully paid off. But in the first year, they'll be paying off either 35 or 50%, depending on the number of years. And we're talking worst case scenario. In the second year, they'll pay off 70%. So more than you put into it. And once you're past either the first year or the second year, then it's fully covered. Okay, so you do have health questions. And that's akin to a life insurance's contestability kind of period. But they just tell you what they're going to pay. You don't have to wonder if they're going to pay and how they're going to pay. They give you that information, so there's no surprises. Okay? Now, I know that was a quick run through, and I don't expect everybody to have it all together in their mind. So, of course, if you have questions about that, feel free to give me a call or make an appointment. Question? I do what I need to do to make it work for the families we serve, but you as an incarcerated person can't take out a pre-need insurance
Chester,
policy.
repeat that for those online.
I do what I need to do.
The question.
I'm sorry. The question was, can an incarcerated person take out a pre-need insurance policy? Okay, so the question is, can a family member take out a pre-need insurance policy on someone who is incarcerated? Correct? The answer is no. But if I don't know someone is incarcerated when you come in to do that for them, that's not a question I've ever asked anyone. If death occurs, if you came to me and took out a policy on your brother, because you can, as long as you have what's called insurable interest, meaning you can take out a policy on your spouse, your parents, your children, your siblings. You can do a pre-need insurance policy for them. When they pass, if their body is then brought to Watkins Garrett Woods is going to file a claim with homesteaders to get those funds, and that's how that's taken care of. Okay, so the question was, what about a 100% disabled veteran or child? As far as veterans go, I'm a veteran myself. The government will not pay for a funeral unless it's service connected, right? They're on active duty and they get killed as a result of that. Other than that, just a veteran, no. But what they will do is pay for cemetery. As long as a person is honorably or generally discharged, they qualify for a free burial at a veteran cemetery. And the closest one to us is M.J. Dolly over in Anderson. So what the government does, they give the veteran the space, the open and close, a liner, and a marker with their name and dates on it, free. And they do all that for a spouse of the veteran for only $300. So if you know any veterans, now I know sometimes we got family at Rest Haven and Greenville Memorial, but I can tell you I'm not paying for anything that I can get for free. And I'm a veteran. Oh. Mhm. Right, so the question is, can the pre-need insurance pay for a service-connected thing with a veteran or a disabled child? So the answer is still no, because individually you have to do a pre-need for yourself and anyone else that you want to cover, unless you have children or grandchildren, doesn't matter their condition, children or grandchildren under 18 are covered. They have a rider, an extra policy up to $5,000 that covers them until they turn 19. And they do that because they figure when children pass, usually they have younger parents that aren't financially able to handle all that. So they add this rider in, and it's free, you don't pay for it, but your children and or grandchildren, and you can list up to 12 of them, are covered with this extra policy at no extra cost. Okay? Okay, so the question is, if you have a life insurance policy and you develop something years after the policy was taken out, will the policy still pay off? The answer is yes. Even pre-need insurance, your condition at the time you take out the policy doesn't affect whether it will pay off later on. If you're diagnosed with something after that, that has no bearing on it. They're only concerned about what your condition is when you take the policy out. All right, we got one more question? Mhm. Okay. So the question is, if someone passes that has a life insurance policy, when they bring that policy into the funeral home, do we assist them with getting those funds to pay for the funeral, correct? The answer is yes, that's called an assignment. So if you got a $20,000 policy, you bring it in, the funeral home has to do paperwork along with the funeral bill to submit to the life insurance company, and they will assign X amount, $8,000, so let's say, to the funeral home to pay for that funeral, and the balance of it, $12,000, they'll send a check to the beneficiary. And yes, we do help with that because the funeral home wants and needs to get paid. All right. We went a little bit over, but no more. One more question. So the question was, I want to make sure I got it right. If a pre-need is taken out on me, and then I die, can the family say, you know what, we'll just pay for Chester's funeral, but use the pre-need on somebody else? No. Because when we do the policy and the contract, we have to send that paperwork to Consumer Affairs. The state oversees and regulates funeral homes when it comes to pre-planning. So we send that paperwork to them. It covers Chester. When Chester dies, it has to be used for Chester. It can't be transferred to someone else. Okay? All right, well, listen, thank you. If there's any questions, concerns that you have later on, feel free to give me a call for an appointment. I don't mind coming to you. I'd rather you come to me, but I don't mind coming to you if I need to. All right, thank you all.
Come on, y'all give him another hand for me. Chester, we do appreciate you coming down on tonight once again, giving us just great information on pre-need and planning for the future. And once again, this is not only for you, but you can plan for members in your family who you know will need this at the last hour. We do thank you. We thank you all for viewing, and thank you for coming on tonight. Now, when we come back off after the summer break, we're going to start a segment in our family matters, talking about wealth and generational wealth. So please get ready. So let's just try to figure out how we can leave something for our children and our grandchildren and legacies in days to come. Until you see us on Sunday morning at 9:45, have a wonderful, blessed, well, this is Father's Day, so please come on to church and let's celebrate our fathers on this Sunday. Sunday school will begin at 9 a.m. and our morning services will begin at 9:45. Until you see us, have a wonderful and blessed and safe evening. Be blessed.